Mr. President,
Majority
first,
Leader.
I believe this is the first time our new senator from Vermont is sitting in the chair. Congratulations. There'll be many more opportunities just like this. Okay. Now, I'm sorry, going back to, in order to place the measures on the calendar under the provisions of Rule 14, I would object to the further proceeding en bloc.
Objection having been heard, the measures will be placed on the calendar.
Okay, Mr. President. As the debate over raising the debt ceiling continues, Leader McConnell said something yesterday that I think is right on the mark. He said that when it comes to moving a debt ceiling proposal through Congress, the House should go first. He is correct. And not only should the House go first, but they must quickly show the American people what their plan actually is for avoiding a first-ever default on the national debt. So far, we haven't heard anything beyond vague and troubling talking points about the need to cut federal spending. That's not going to fly when you're in the majority, as Speaker McCarthy, of course, is. The substance and details make all the difference. The debt ceiling is not some political game, and Speaker McCarthy has an obligation to level with the American people on what precisely the new House plans to do in order to avoid a default. Now, President Biden and the Speaker have reportedly agreed to sit down in the near future on this topic, and the Speaker is apparently heralding this development as some sort of big win or concession. But look, Speaker McCarthy sitting down without a clear plan is no win. Sitting down to talk about the debt ceiling without a plan is like coming to the table with no cards. President Biden, meanwhile, has a plan. He has cards. He's been clear that there must be no brinksmanship and no default on the debt ceiling. Speaker McCarthy, what about you? The House GOP is threatening spending cuts. Well, what are they? Why the evasion? Why is your conference hiding from the American people? House Republicans, where are your cards? Again, I want to be clear that the debt ceiling is a subject of the highest consequence, and using it as a bargaining chip, using it as brinksmanship, as hostage-taking, as Republicans are trying to do, is exceedingly dangerous. Because if the House of Representatives continues on their current course and allows the United States to default on its debt obligations, every single American is going to pay a terrible and expensive price. The consequences of default are not some theoretical abstraction. If default happens, Americans will see the consequences in their daily lives. Interest rates will go soaring on everything, from credit cards and student loans to cars, mortgages, and more. That thousands of dollars for each American going right out the door will happen, and through no fault of their own. Retirement plans like 401ks would lose their value, robbing people of their hard-earned livelihoods. For millions of Americans who one day dream of owning a home, their own piece of the rock, a default would add $130,000 to the lifetime cost of a new home loan. Imagine spending years of putting a little bit of your paycheck aside every month in order to buy a house, only to find out that suddenly that dream is entirely out of reach because radical politicians in Washington bumbled their way into a financial catastrophe. That's precisely the danger we approach, thanks to the House's GOP's reckless approach to the debt ceiling. None of this need be inevitable or even likely, if only House Republicans quit their radical posturing and work with Democrats in a serious way to raise the debt ceiling together. And we should do it soon, not months from now when America finds itself staring straight into the abyss of financial catastrophe. And I'd remind my Republican colleagues, they did it before. When Trump was president 3 times, no Democratic obstruction or hostage-taking. We did it once together when Biden was president. And much of this debt comes from spending when Trump was president, voted on by a Republican House and a Republican Senate. So it's a bit of hypocrisy now to say that they can't do it again and are holding it hostage and are playing a dangerous form of brinksmanship. It shouldn't matter who's president. It's still bills we already incurred that must be paid for the good of all Americans. Now, on the Republican national sales tax, the House Republicans keep churning this stuff out. It's unbelievable. In the 118th Congress, it's already a tale of two parties. Democrats united on one side, Republicans in chaos on the other. While Democrats are laser-focused on making life better for everyday families, Republicans are making it clear they want to help the very, very wealthy, the ultra-rich. While Democrats want to embrace collaboration and bipartisanship wherever possible, Republicans seem to be trapped by MAGA extremism. That's the contrast in a nutshell. Democratic unity versus Republican chaos. Democratic unity versus Republican chaos. Yesterday, I joined with President Biden, the Vice President, Leader Jeffries, and Democratic colleagues from both chambers to talk about how we Democrats can maintain our unity and turn it into action in order to help the American people. Later today, I will join with Leader Jeffries to further highlight the contrast between Democrats' people-first agenda and Republicans' radical plans for a national sales tax. Multiple extreme right Republicans say that Speaker McCarthy has promised them a vote on their national sales tax bill, which they guilefully refer to as the Fair Tax Act. Nothing could be less fair to the American people. In a universe of bad ideas, a Republican national sales tax reigns supreme. This proposal, pushed by the MAGA fringe that now controls the House Republican Conference, would impose a 30% tax on every single purchase Americans make, just as inflation is beginning to drop. This so-called fair tax is truly foul legislation for American families. Young families, you want to buy a home? Well, the Republican tax plan would add nearly $125,000 extra on top of the price you pay for your house, an impossible sum for many young people struggling to get their start in life. And what about Americans out there thinking of buying a car? Under the Republican tax plan, the average American would pay $10,000 more on that single purchase alone. What about seniors getting ready for retirement? A Republican national sales tax means people's life savings would suddenly lose 30% of their value. Imagine working your entire life, playing by the rules, paying your taxes, saving a little of each paycheck, only to have Republicans swoop in and erase nearly a third of what you saved up. And it doesn't end there, Mr. President. Under the Republican tax plan, a mere trip to the grocery store would be torture. Eggs are high enough right now at $4.25 a dozen. They'd be $5.50 under the Republican plan. Milk right now is $4.40, would cost $5.70 under the Republican plan. And the same holds true for everything else: bread, produce, canned goods, cleaning supplies, soap, shampoo, toothpaste, diapers, you name it. All of it would go up by a third for millions of families, millions, tens of millions, probably hundreds of millions. It would be a devastating blow. But, Mr. President, you know who wouldn't mind a Republican national sales tax? The ultra-rich, the ultra-wealthy. The top 1% of our earners wouldn't notice much change in expenses. That's who would win under the Republicans' proposal, the very, very rich, because their taxes would be greatly reduced, even further, even worse than under the Trump tax cuts. No wonder, then, that even Grover Norquist, no friend of Democrats, calls this bill, quote, a terrible idea and, quote, an assault on your retirement savings. Look, if Republicans want to start their majority with a debate on their national sales tax bill, Democrats would welcome it. Let the American people see which party is fighting for everyday folks and which party is trying to rig the game in favor of the ultra-rich. It's a debate the American people need to see. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.